All right, welcome everyone who's joining. We're going to give folks a few moments to join, then we'll get started with a quick intro. Okay, looks like we've got a good amount of folks already hopping in. So thank you everyone so much for joining today for Architect Engagement Strategies in Challenging Markets. Really excited to bring this panelist webinar to you today. We've got some great panelists on. We have Jeff Haber, the Managing Director at W&W Glass, Kevin Miller, VP of Business Development at Ohio Gratings, and Carolina Albano, VP of Stoventech Rain Screen with Stow Corp. We also have Megan Kavinsky from Point to Point, who's going to be moderating today's discussion, and Vardhan Mehta from Acelab, who's going to be giving a keynote presentation. All right. Looks like we've got a good amount of folks in the room. So Megan, whenever you're ready, feel free to take it away and introduce today's
Thanks, Bo. I'd love to. Hi, everyone, and thanks for joining us today. Certainly everyone here is familiar with the data. The ABI is down to 45.7. Construction spending has seen a 2% year-over-year decline in non-residential projects. And 68% of architectural firms are reporting delays or cancellations. So a timely topic for sure, as you can tell by the attendance that's in the room today. But our panelists are here to help. All of these brands, all these companies, all these products are finding ways to be successful despite this downturn. You still can win even in a down market. And we're going to have a great discussion for about 30-35 minutes, open it up for some Q&A. And then Vardhan is going to jump in. He has some really timely data, a survey of 600 architects, and he's going to be able to share with us how at this moment in time, how manufacturers should be allocating your specification resources so that you can make sure you maximize your investment and make sure you get the spec. So it's a really smart, very tenured group of panelists. Everyone's been in the industry 20 plus years, seen 3 downturns, been through the highs, been through the lows, has the stories to tell. So in terms of introductions, I'm going to start with Carolina. She's been leading the rain screen team, Stoventech, at Stow Corp since 2021. And she's been in rain screens or facades pretty much her whole career. She actually started as an engineer, which is common with Kevin, and is a firm believer in innovation and preserving the values that make this industry so great. So over her career, she's been on the technical side, she's been in business development. She really loves building things, not just buildings, but teams, community, the construction industry as a whole. I mentioned Kevin Miller. He is the Vice President of Business Development for Ohio Gratings. He's got his bachelor's degree in civil engineering from Georgia Institute of Technology and is a licensed professional engineer. Is that where you went?
Yes.
Oh, look at that connection.
Oh, you went there too?
Yeah. Great. He's partnered with customers and clients to provide strategic solutions for over 30 years. And his experience includes civil and structural engineering, product design, and creating partnerships and solutions that provide positive results. He's a member of ASTM and the Transportation Research Board, and he serves on multiple research and standard committees. Certainly pedigreed there. And then Jeff Haber. Jeff is the managing partner at W&W Glass. They are one of the largest specialty glazing contractors in the U.S. He's been working with architects, engineers, and glazing contractors to provide engineered structural glass systems for over 30 years. Jeff's responsible for sales and estimating for the engineered glass system, W&W Glass's engineered glass system called Insight. And he's hot off the press, recent recipient of the Glass Build Award for R&D for his concealed interior clamped cable tension system in 2 Manhattan West. Kudos to you, Jeff.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
All right. So now that you're all credentialed and believable, let's get into it here. So I'd love to start by asking each of you to share your perspective on what is happening out in the market right now. What is happening in the world of architecture and construction? How do you see the landscape? Carolina? or Jeff. Jeff, I'll call on you, Jeff. Yeah.
I'll just jump in there. Sorry about that. And I'm not an engineer. I just play one during 9 to 5 here at W&W. Thanks for having me today. So I think when we think about what the landscape looks like, it's challenging, as everybody can get a sense of out there. I think the post-pandemic, the work from home craze has kind of pushed commercial real estate to the brink, in a lot of cities, so that if you're not literally dealing in A+ space, you've got a big problem with empty buildings and 30 to 50% occupancy. And that's a challenge. And that means basically those developers who aren't building the mega, $5 billion developments like JP Morgan Chase headquarters are not pursuing new work right now, which is a real problem for the architecture and engineering and subcontracting community. So what we've done is we sort of, 4 or 5 years ago, we kind of took a look at what was going on and said, you know what, we need to start pivoting towards more infrastructure work, airports, mass transit, hospitals, some university type things, away from the straight up just commercial office building market. And it seemed like it was getting strained even before the pandemic, but the pandemic really exacerbated that situation. And we've been lucky that we've been able to be successful in securing 4 or 5 hospital contracts, new terminals for Delta Airlines at LaGuardia Airport, JFK T6. So some fairly substantial projects, and they have a wide range of team partners, various architects, engineers, cost consultants, everybody who's at that top layer of the design process. And we've been able to kind of leverage our internal resources and our know-how and delivering these kinds of projects to them and helping them be more educated on their product selection. And I think also it's one of those things where we're trying to bring all the new technologies that's out there, whether it's dealing with the changes in building codes for energy efficiency or bird safe glazing or all those types of things, and let the design community know how to use these products as cost effectively as possible, and let them know that there are a lot of options out there, that they're not stuck with just one version of anything, and they can still be creative and we can still be cost conscious at the same time if we work together. But you got to start that process early.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I heard a couple things in what you were saying. Starting where you ended, starting earlier, with architects is one way to help, I think win in a down market, be a partner earlier in the project, help create and collaborate on the vision sooner. Another thing was be really focused, they say like good marketing is the act of ruthless exclusion. Good business strategy can be the same thing, being hyper focused. And while maybe hospitals are nonprofit money, it sounded like it was a lot of public sector money versus private money in terms of like where you were suggesting there was opportunity. I'm curious if Stowe and Ohio Gradings are seeing things similarly, or what else you guys have done.
Yes, we definitely agree, and we've seen some of the same trends. And yeah, specialization, knowing where do you have a special advantage. And I know this is like marketing 101, but we tend to just like want to be all things to all people still to this day. Like we have conversations in our meetings all the time, and it's like, well, we're really good at this. And a lot of times in your personal life and at work, you don't realize how good you are at something. It's like, isn't everybody good at that? Well, no, not really. So you got to listen to your customer. You got to find, what are people coming to you for? What do installers come to you for? What are your customers coming to you for? And what are those questions? And that's kind of like your blind spot of your sweet spot.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's something, a lot of our clients, when we first start working with them and we're like, okay, well, what does your ideal architect look like? Or who's your ideal customer? And it's like, well, anyone. It's like, well, no, if anyone can be your customer, then no one is really your customer, right? Like maybe anyone that comes to you, if it's inbound, maybe, but outbound, who do you really want to be attracting to you? And being really conscious about that is so important. What about you, Kevin? What do you see in the market?
Well, from our perspective, I think a couple of things. There always seems to be money being spent somewhere. It may not be in where you anticipate it to be, but you have to at some level be a little bit flexible and figure out where that trail is and where you can go. And I think the other part that I'd kind of like to add on to here is we also, I think in a down economy or when things aren't going as briskly as they were before, I actually think that gives you a lot more opportunity with architects to get in early, work with them on designs, and give them something that's cost effective yet completes their project. They're a lot more willing to talk when they're looking for answers than when they're kind of flush with money and can do what they want. So we've usually found that when the market's down, we get a lot more interaction. We get a lot more interest in talking to us. We get a lot more opportunities to value engineer, help them save money and provide solution, which then tends to help us when the market starts to rebound because we were there for them when they needed us. So I think it's a positive as well as a negative because it does give you that opportunity to be in there early, provide them with a solution and let them know that you can help them with what they're looking for. So that's how we kind of look at it here. Not always successful, but certainly has provided a lot of opportunity to us over the years.
There's a couple things that I'm thinking about as I'm listening to you guys talk, and I'm going to start with Kevin. You mentioned value engineering, right?
Right.
How are you helping the architect with value engineering? Are you showing them how your product can help value engineer so that other areas of the project can have other layers of investment? Are you having to value engineer other products and encourage sacrifices in other areas so you guys can come in? Like, how are you helping them with value engineering more specifically?
Okay, so a lot of times, I think I'm losing something here.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
Can you hear
Nope,
us?
I got it. Yeah, I got it.
Okay.
Okay. A lot of times what we find is an architect will go in and usually you obviously get the most feedback and the most opportunity when you're talking to them about solutions and they have a project that fits, something that they're working on right then. And a lot of times they don't really have an idea. They kind of know what they want it to look like, but they don't really know exactly what they need. And so we've used that opportunity in a lot of situations to be able to say, okay, you can get something pretty similar to what you're looking for that's going to save you a pretty significant amount of money if you're willing to make these sacrifices. And there's a lot of options we can give them in there. But generally, we're looking for opportunities that not only, and I'll be honest, we're looking for something that also specifies us in and holds that spec. So when you have the opportunity to come in and say, okay, this is what you're looking for. We have a little bit better solution for you. It's going to save you a little bit of money, but it may be something that we're maybe a little more efficient at also producing. So you're looking for that balance between how can we help you and how can we also give you something that fits a little bit better into our manufacturing capability, or looking at solving their pain problem through some new product that gives you an opportunity, but also value engineers it. I'm not trying to be vague on it, but there's a lot of kind of seeing where the pain is and helping them. And, you know, when you talk about value engineering, there's a lot of value to just being able to do that for them.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and certainly none of you, I don't think, are going to want to race in and be the low cost provider. That's not your value proposition for any of the three of you, you know?
Certainly
and so,
not.
Yeah. How are you holding price? How are you holding value, you know, and having that value engineering conversation? Carolina and Jeff, do you guys have anything to add or build upon from what Kevin was sharing?
Yeah, I think, oftentimes when we're sitting with the design team and, usually we do get brought in fairly early and they have just a glorified rendering of the building and they kind of have this big glazed area or the curtain wall looks like, something very preliminary, and they'll have a few other project references, from around the country, and they'll say, oh, here's a job in New York or Boston, Chicago, whatever. We're thinking something along those lines for this area, spandrel here, storefronts this. And we sort of have to it's like herding sheep. We got to kind of narrow their focus and try to figure out, okay, what's really important to you? Is it overall aesthetic? Is it performance? Is it cost? Because all these different types of projects that we get involved in, sometimes it really is cost over design. But oftentimes it could be design over cost. So you really have to find out where is their trigger point and what are they really looking to spend their money on, and where can they afford to kind of say, okay, that can be a generic, but I've got to focus on this area of the building or this area of the skin, and try to offer them a product that meets both their aesthetic, that that will be able to survive the budget acts, and can also meet the performance. And performance right now is really driving a lot of the design, because energy codes everywhere. It's got to be more thermally efficient, lower U values. In Boston, they've got that crazy energy code. Everything's going triple glazed. So there's a lot of different markets that are sensitive to high performance criteria. And that does, unfortunately for them, limit what they can have in certain instances. So we try to figure out with the high quality vendors that we work with, because we don't physically make anything, it kind of gives us a lot more flexibility to bring in vendors that fit a particular project, to offer them a solution that can meet the code, meet the performance, as well as give them some opportunity to hit the aesthetic mark that they're looking for. So it's really incumbent on folks like us and everyone else on this panel to understand the products that are out there, constantly be evaluating different vendors and different manufacturing processes, and making sure that your vendor partners, or yourself, if you're making it, that you have all the technical backup to be able to offer the design team, that multi-part strategy that fits, performance, budget, and design. And it's a real challenge. It's like it's a little bit of an art, almost as much as it is a skill, to help them, because they want to feel empowered to make their own design choices.
It's like you can have, I don't know, in marketing world, fast, cheap, and quality. You can have two of the three, but not all three, right?
Typically
and so
not.
what are you picking here?
Yeah.
What about you, Carolina? Any value engineering secrets from what you guys are doing?
Well, yes, everything that you just said, absolutely true, Jeff. And schedule certainty. So you just said fast, right?
Yeah.
Schedule certainty in today's world where labor is uncertain, tropical storms, hurricanes, like it is port strikes, can you provide me schedule certainty? And that has been a secret for us too. It's like, yes, these are the things that I can promise and deliver on, and we can build trust with these things. And so definitely performance, definitely understanding what your customer needs and what your product does, how we solve the problem, and how we definitely tactically address like local law 27 or thermal efficiency or dew point management, whatever is important to that particular customer that our product is uniquely able to solve and positioned. And for us also, schedule certainty has really helped.
Yeah. Building on that schedule certainty, one thing that we see a lot of clients do is leave behind when they take the time to build out an install network. So not just schedule certainty, but quality of install certainty, and the infrastructure that you've built out, not bringing that forward into the conversation as proactively as you can. Like that seems to be like low-hanging fruit that a lot of people are unclear of how to appropriately leverage early in the design conversation.
I think you're right about that, because I know from our experience and the jobs, the projects that we've been involved with recently, being able to show design teams how to build something and how to efficiently build something and work on the logistics with the overall project team, construction manager, owner's rep, developer, and understand, okay, it's not only, yes, we can solve your curtain wall facade, not a problem. I can give you the fanciest glass wall in the world if you want. I can make 58-foot long glass. But, if I've got a postage stamp size lot and I'm landlocked with 3 other buildings, I may not be able to install 58-foot long glass. As a, for instance, we did a job up in Erie Insurance in Pennsylvania, got this whole design finished, and the glass is 58 feet long. It's fantastic, amazing, and construction manager says, okay, how much room do you need, in front of the building to set up? And I just looked at him, I said, all of it. And he's like, what do you mean all of it? I said, it's 58 feet and I got to swing it, so I need to 180 feet, with a boom and a crane and everything else. And having that conversation early, we were able to kind of help them solve a problem that allowed this product to stay in the job and get the architect the design he wanted. So there's multiple, you know, things that you've got to tick, boxes that you've got to tick in order to solve some of these problems. And schedule for sure is definitely one of them, like Carolina said.
Yeah. One thing that keeps coming up, I think if we were doing a word cloud of this conversation, the word early would be right at the center of it, right? So how do you identify jobs early? You know, and Kevin, you even started by saying, you know, and it is sort of architect marketing or sales and marketing 101, like someone with an active project is going to be more interested in talking to you. You know, how are you guys identifying early where there are opportunities that you're a right fit project for?
Well, in our case, I mean, so there's a little bit of both that goes on. You have a little bit of a shotgun approach, and sometimes you just get lucky. You know, you've reached out, you've talked to them, tried to get into a presentation or have some type of meeting with them, and in the course of the conversation, they have a project. Some of it is more of a rifle approach, where we use some other services and some analytical data to know what kind of projects they work on, what they tend to be involved with, whether they've specified us before or not, who they are specifying. And then based on that, we put together how we approach that particular firm and what kind of work they do to see if there's a fit that we can go in and look at them and get that meeting and find out if they have any projects. So we go at it both directions, and we probably have about equal success in both directions. But the other part of it is follow up. I mean, once you're in, they may not have anything then, but in 3 months or 6 months or 9 months, they're probably going to have something that they need you on. And you've got to maintain that relationship and maintain that contact in it in order to get it. Because if you don't, they're going to forget you. And you know, it's whatever is the most recent in your mind. And it takes persistence to be able to get through that, all that noise, and make sure that you're there when they need you. So it's not only that initial approach, it's the follow-up afterwards to just make sure that you're top of mind when those opportunities come up.
Yeah.
Yeah, pleasantly persistent.
Yeah,
Carolina,
pleasantly,
yeah.
yes.
I mean, it's a hustle, right? I mean, it really is. When you're, especially when you're starting out, when you're a new team and nobody knows you, you're a new product. And job sites have been a great place for us to find projects that don't exist yet. So you either a job site that you're currently on and spec for, or literally we've had salespeople in our company that drove by a job site, got out of their car, went to the trailer and said, "What are you guys working on? And where are you going next?" And so that does work too. You just got to be, bold enough to ask.
I love that. That's pretty grassroots, like, I mean, this is a relationship, handshake driven industry. And so that in-person component of it is not something that can be overlooked. And, where are the people? They're on the job site, right?
That's right.
So,
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great point, because I think, ultimately this is a relationship driven business and a relationship driven industry. Because if you go through the trenches and you solve those problems and you are successful in your work, more often than not, you will get a call about the next project. But a lot of it is, what have you done for me lately? And who's the team leader? And you have a different project manager. And the big firms, they've got, 300-400 people there, and they may not know, oh, who did that job, XYZ. They Google structural glass systems and they pull up whoever. They didn't speak to the job captain on that job, and they don't know who did that job, whether it's rain screens or grills or gratings. And, so it's incumbent on us and our sales team and our reps and everybody else to constantly be a polite pest, I would say, give them a reason to want to call you, but definitely have a reason to get in there and talk to them. Hey, what are you working on? What are you doing? I saw that job in XYZ magazine. Great work there. Who was the team leader on it? All of those things. And I think what Carolina said, I love the idea of going to a job site and just knocking on the trailer and saying, "What's up, folks? How you doing?"
Yeah. The other word that I think could be in the word cloud, early, and then you also have all talked a lot about identifying pain in the conversation, right? Which is sort of, sale, again, everything 101, but we're going to take it to the 201, 301 level. So how do you identify pain early in the conversation? What are some of your best questions that you ask or areas that you're constantly probing on? Like, I can usually find pain in one of these 3 or 4 things. Or do you guys think that way, or how do you pursue that?
I guess I'll go. So we try to conduct surveys, and they're anonymous surveys, but we know who we're surveying. So, you know, we're surveying architects, we're surveying installers, we're surveying general contractors. Um, and you know, it's like very simple. When you go to select a product, what is the number one thing you look for? And it's 9 times out of 10, it's like the one thing that they're scared that won't happen. And so for us, like, I don't know, in my experience, it's like, okay, that is definitely, if it's the first thing you think of, it's what's on your mind, it's a pain point, it's a concern. So surveying and asking, like, what is it that you go to? What's your number one quality that you look for when specifying a product?
Kevin or Jeff, do you guys have ways that you specifically try and, you know, identify what is keeping that particular, you know, project lead, you know, up at night, you know, as they think about what's on their plate?
Well, in our case, a lot of times, so we have several companies that, actually utility companies that have, over time, as we've worked with them, we start asking them questions. Okay, what worked well on this job? What didn't? What do your crews in the field have to deal with that maybe you're not thinking of when you're out, you know, on the initial design portion of this? So initial design, they're thinking about, hey, how do we cover this fault that we've got to put grading over top of? And there's air exchange and there's all kinds of other things. But what they typically don't always think about is the people in the field who have to access the vault after the grading's put in place. So the people in the field that are using the, or maybe not using the product, but interacting with it daily versus the people who are only trying to reach some design element aren't always the same. So in a lot of times in cases like that, and in some cases with installers and others, we'll ask both sides of the equation. You know, you've got a designer who's thinking one way, generally cost, uh, ease of installation, schedule, all of those things. And then on the other side, you've got people who have to interact with it every day. And so getting the perspective of both so that when you can come to the designer and say, hey, we found in the past that people have had issues with this. Is this something you're concerned about? Because they're not always thinking in terms of, they may be going for a certain look or a certain design parameter that's upmost in their mind, but they're not thinking about what's going to happen when the public's using it as much. So we try to blend those two together as we're helping our customers and clients through that process.
Yeah, like almost uncovering pain that they don't even know could exist and
Right.
sharing it back with them. Like, we're already thinking about this on your behalf, right? Like,
Or we've did a project similar in the past and found that we had this issue. Is this something you're concerned about? So we take a lot of historical reference with it too, but that's part of our process in trying to help our customers get there.
I think we also have a process where we look at something and we try to leverage our experience, the good lessons and the bad lessons.
Yeah.
And when we're talking with these design teams, we always try to make sure that they have a day 2 solution. If there's a breakage, if there's a replacement, if they have to get access to something, because a lot of times, you know, they're trying to drive the design from an aesthetic standpoint. And yeah, we may find a way to build it, but I may never be able to replace it without tearing apart a massive chunk of construction. And most developers and owners and operators, they don't want that. So a lot of times we'll talk to building maintenance folks and the facility managers on these buildings, and we'll ask them straight up, you know, what's your plan to clean this after the fact? What's your plan for access? How do you what's your maintenance strategy for this? And we'll have that dialogue very early, you know, as the design is progressing. And most of the design teams, they appreciate us being sensitive to that because they don't want to irritate their client by coming up with some extreme design that ultimately can't be serviced because they're not going to get that second call, you know, from them.
Or built.
So, yeah,
Yeah.
or built. I mean,
Yeah.
usually the
Yeah.
built stuff we can typically handle. We try to save them from themselves. It's not always, as you know, it's not always so easy. But I think really trying to make sure that there's a day two solution, that there's a replacement strategy, that, that we are thinking for the long term. And typically, they're generally receptive to most of that.
Mm-hmm. That a little bit of a shameless plug here. I do have the opportunity to work with Carolina on more of a day-to-day basis and the Stove-Tech team. We did a piece recently called the owner's consideration guide, and I think it sort of gets to what you guys are talking about. Like, how do you think long-term about the value of what you're doing? Because right now, a lot of people are living in the moment I shouldn't say right now, but when in the architectural firm, they're certainly thinking about the owner long term and the value of the investment and the building itself, but a piece specific for the owner, that can showcase some of those things that you're doing and help them wrap their head around it is like frequently a gap in tooling that we see when we're talking to people in the industry. And it's hard. A lot of building product manufacturers don't get the opportunity to be in front of the building owner. You're proxied like through the GC and through the architectural firm, and so how do you get that story and be able to share all the things that you're thinking about? Like, I think what you were just talking about, Jeff, is like a great example of how that could be of value and differentiate you in the market.
Yeah, and I think what we tend to do is, we'll call folks like Kevin and say, okay, what's been your experience using this kind of product? And do you have any job references and, do's and don'ts, and hey, this is what they're looking for. Do you think this is a good idea? Or how would you enhance this design, or how would you modify it to make it more user friendly, or, more long-term, better for long-term performance? Because I think a lot of times what Kevin said is right, that they're not thinking about how the user is going to be using it X years down the road, or if they need to access it or maintain it or do some other type of work, as opposed to what does it look like and how does it fit in with their design. And a lot of the products that we all, touch on a regular basis kind of fall into that category at different levels.
Sort of one of our other topics, which is collaborative product development, so would you, what you're describing right there, do you talk about it that way? Do you think about it that way, Jeff, that like we're actually collaborating with the
Absolutely.
architectural firm, with the facility managers to create a better product, and is that is it a structured process, or is it something that just sort of more organically happens in the process of getting the design spec together? How does that work?
It's structured organically, and we learned the hard way, where we used to be a very rigid product based company. We were a distributor for a particular product, and it was like, okay, we're going to give you this product one way or the other. We hope you like it, but ultimately, yeah, you asked for this, we can give it to you this way. I'm a big hand talker, sorry. It's one of those things where we're trying to, now where we're trying to figure out, how can we have this collaborative back and forth and really be more flexible, try to listen to them more, and then try to say, okay, here's a solution that we can work on. And what we wind up doing is we'll end up giving them 4, 5, 6 different alternatives and options and iterations of these different facade types that they want. And then once they hone in on 2 or 3 of them, we'll say, okay, here's price and schedule and lead time for them. Does that work with what you're looking for? Right. So it's really trying to take all of those different ideas and funnel them down into something that's useful, and then give them, we're not the designer. We're never going to be that architect. So we want to say, okay, here is a bunch of options you can have, and we'll partner with different vendors and say, here are their standard and custom type profiles that you can have, and do they work with you, and try to figure out what's going to be a better fit. So that real roll up your sleeve and work with them side by side and be a partner to them. And sometimes we call it free con. We're doing free con. Half of my day is spent doing free con. You have to make that investment of time, and listen, you throw a lot of things at the wall and hopefully something sticks. You have no choice. That's just how this market works right now. There's a lot of competition out there. There's a lot of really high quality firms who do similar products to what we do. We just need to figure out a better mousetrap and be more of an advocate for the client, and offer something that they really want, and give them a reason to call us back again and again.
Yeah, I mean, the amount of spec design work that you guys do, to win a job, and your jobs are substantial, so
Yeah.
you're going to have a lot of reward if you chase it, but the amount and the risk that you're at the upfront of the project is, always just mind blowing to me. And then, I mean, you do have architectural resources on staff doing these things. You have a full architectural firm,
Yeah.
like you have a big investment in providing that design assistance that allows you to compete and to win at the end of the day. But you bring that forward in the market, like, pretty aggressively, which I think is a big point of differentiation in the product development.
And I think for all of us, trying to figure out how do we differentiate ourselves from that competitor, from that other vendor who does something that looks similar, but it's not as well engineered or well thought out. That's the challenge for us, is to tell our story and try to show them why should they use us.
Mm-hmm. Carolina and Kevin, what about you guys? How do you handle joint product development?
I think, like Jeff said, it is an organic process, and it's all goes back to relationships. Every company that I've ever worked at, there was always a special invitation behind the curtain to peek behind the curtain. So when architects are people, like everyone wants to feel special. So if you create a special environment for them to be heard, they want to tell you, they want to help. They are that's what they live for. They're just, waiting for that opportunity. And as you build a relationship, as you invite them on a trip to your company, I've taken architects to Spain for a manufacturing company that I worked at
Mm.
over there. I've taken people to California for a manufacturing company over there. And on those trips, there are connections, not just with you. They see your company, they get to see your manufacturing processes, your people, what you stand for. And then they're in a position they're more invested, and they kind of cheer you on, they spec you more, but also once they've helped you to come up with something, that they're customers for life. But I say just invite them on, ask for their feedback. Even if you don't have a factory and you can't afford to bring them to wherever you happen to be, then create a gathering somewhere and bring your top designers together. And I promise you, like that has paid off everywhere that I've ever worked.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Yeah, like an architectural council or a customer council of some sort of even loosely structured, right?
Right.
Informally gathering feedback once a year. Saw another client do this really effectively at the builder show, not with architects, but with I don't know, sort of a fabricator installer segment, and just soliciting their top volume customers' feedback in a more structured way. And encouraging that discussion and dialogue about the market and where it's going, similar to what we've done today. Highly effective. What about you, Kevin? Do you do a lot of product
We do
development?
we do a lot of product development and collaborative design. And I mean, I think Jeff's comment about unstructuredness, or whatever it was, or
Mhm.
a lot of times you find that the customer has a problem, but they have a difficult time actually identifying what it is and what the solution is. And they have a pain point, but they don't really quite understand what it really is. I don't know how to put it better, but it's almost like they can't get to the heart of what's really causing the issue.
Mhm.
So a lot of times you'll hear a lot of complaining about a particular thing, whatever feature that may be. And you have to be listening all the time when you're collaborating with them so that you can pick up on what it is and actually be able to move forward with something that you generally have to propose to them. They generally can't tell you exactly what they want. They just know they have a problem. So we're listening all the time for those kind of things and things that we might be able to help, not only for that customer, but the market at large. It may be something that's a market wide problem that you don't even know until you've heard them complain about it. So I think one of the things to keep in mind when you're working on the specs and you're working with architects is, in your particular industry, your product, you know more about it than anybody that you're talking to in the field. And so when you hear those kind of comments and those pain points, you're honestly the one responsible for figuring out how to solve it and bring that product to them. And you have to always be thinking that way because they don't know as much about it as you do. Even if you're an early salesperson, you already know more. So you've got to be thinking that way so that you can provide your customers that value so that they do call you back and that they come to see you in Spain or wherever it may be.
Well, I'm open for any trips to Spain or California. I probably can't buy any of your products, but if you need me to moderate a conversation, I'm happy to help. So we do have a question from the audience, and I'd love some more. I'll start with the one that we have so far. So what if you're a manufacturer with a more expensive product that doesn't want to be value engineered off a project? Are there ways that you sometimes can identify other areas of the project? Do you ever identify areas of the project that you feel like could be being given less accommodation, or how do you handle that?
I know I can tell you when we've recommended a product in the past, or we have a particular product that we think fits this application, but it's at the higher end and it's a big price point. I think what we try to do is we try to identify multiple reasons why this product is key to this project. How does using this product bring value to the design, to the performance, to the longevity of the project? That try to convince them that, and assuming that it's true, that you're not just spending an extra 5 cents today, but you're going to be saving an extra 20 cents 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 15 years from now. That you try not to, it all depends on who the project is for. If they have a long-term view and it's a developer who's not just flipping a building, they're going to be very sensitive to having a product that has a long-term performance and a long-term warranty, for instance, as opposed to just being VE'd out in the short term because it's 10% cheaper, but they give a 2-year warranty instead of a 10-year warranty. So I think you need to identify the properties of those products that justify their price point. And as long as you can justify why your product, which may looks very similar, is different and what benefits it brings long-term and performance-wise, you tend to have a better chance of surviving that VE or that Me Too axe.
I think definitely life cycle cost, like Jeff was saying. If you can show them on the life cycle that your product has that better return, that's certainly part of it. I think there's also a variability in how much of the portion of the project is it. Are you being VE'd out on something that's a small portion of the project that they're really giving up a lot more by not doing it? Or is it a major component that you really need to be focusing on that life cycle cost? I think there's a few ways to go there, but I agree with Jeff. You've got to be able to show that longer term benefit.
Yeah, and I think that, you've got to look at the history. Are you always getting VE'd out of jobs? Then maybe you're not talking to the right people, right?
Yeah.
Obviously. Are you interiors or exteriors? Interiors don't get VE'd as much as exteriors do, people. So that's also something to keep in mind. How are you positioning yourself? There are plays on words for your product, like sintered stone when it's really porcelain, like things like that like play on your customer's mind, right? The architect is like, no, but I've got to have the sintered stone. It's like, yeah, this is sintered stone too. We just don't call it that. So it's like, where do you stand out and where can you be seen as unique? Like at Fireclay, for example, we used to, like, all of the colors are unique. So when an architect specs the, flamingo pink, for lack of a better name, then it's like, it's really hard to get that color out. So it's like, find ways to get into the spec with a very unique name, product, performance spec, whatever, all of these things that Jeff and Kevin just said. And then it's a little bit harder once the project's gotten to construction documents and bids are going out. It's going to be a lot harder for you to get replaced.
Yeah. Well, and that feels like, certainly if you guys have questions, keep thinking about them, but that feels actually like a great transition to the research that Acelab has recently conducted into, what are the best ways to be getting into or to maximize your specification investment, so Vardon, I think you could pick up here and give the audience a lot more to think about. Thanks, panelists.
Absolutely.
That was fantastic. You guys all did such a great job. Really appreciate you all.
Thank you.
Yeah, just to shout out with um, for the panelists. I mean, I think those were some very thoughtful insights. I almost wish we invited architects to this webinar as well, so they could hear how you guys are thinking about creative ways and really meaningful ways to help architects. You're not saints, you're doing it, of course, for your own growth, but then these are like some really like truly valuable ways in which manufacturers can help architects, especially at this time. So with that, I'll just quickly introduce myself and then go into the report. I'm a second-gen architect. My dad's an architect, uncle's an engineer. Went to architecture school in New York, then practiced at a top 10 firm in the city. There designed projects for the State Department, which were US embassies around the world, and institutional projects for MIT and Yale. For better or worse, almost all of my time in practice, I was doing stuff I didn't go to architecture school for. So it was specifications, product research, working with manufacturers, and really understood the process soup to nuts and realized that due to a lack of knowledge, expertise, bandwidth, time, resources, architects tend to repeat the specifications almost all of the time. When I started my architecture school at Harvard, met a team of architects who had a similar experience in practice, but we all also realized the importance of working very closely with manufacturers in that as architects, we play a huge role as influencers on a project. And the more educated you are, the more knowledge you have, the more trusted advisors you have, you can meaningfully shape the outcome of the built environment through that project. So with that, I'm gonna share my screen here. Hopefully you all can see. While I go through this report, we're going to share the recording of the panel and this report presentation after the event, but feel free to keep asking more questions in chat, and then we'll have a few minutes for Q&A at the end as well. All right, super. So just to introduce our team first and what Acelab does, I'm going to talk more about Acelab in a second, but Acelab, essentially, we've built a direct highway between architects and manufacturers. And what brought this team of people with over 95 years of experience across architecture, specifications, and technology together was this insight that there's actually a lot of value for every stakeholder on a project to engage really early in design. It's not just for the architect, it's not just for the manufacturer, not just for the contractor, but when we are involved from the earliest stages all together, it really helps to avoid a lot of rework, a lot of errors, frustration, and really ensures a high quality output in terms of the built environment. So more on Acelab in a few slides, but first I'm going to talk about the methodology of this research from the users of our platform, and I'll show you the platform in a second, but 600 architects, 200 manufacturers with a sales and marketing background. And then we also comb together reports from AIA, Deltek, CMD, some other industry reports, and then the ABI. So what we were really trying to learn as sort of a matchmaker ourselves between architects and manufacturers, but then also in terms of what architects are doing for their specification beer, what are the priorities, what are the trends, and then from manufacturers, where are they investing, what has worked incredibly well for them, and really like trying to get to be able to compare the cost and quality across those investments. The primary goal for this report was helping our partners that we work with both on the architecture side and the manufacturer side adapt to this time. On the architecture side as well, there's been a lot of changes in firms. There's layoffs happening almost all of the time. As we can see, the ABI now has been under 50 for more than 12 months. On the manufacturer side, it has a direct impact on how they foresee specification growth and the architect channel as well. So the goal of this report was, one of the goals, I should say, was to help manufacturers allocate resources more effectively with new data and insights about this down market, and then really find effective ways to increase that specification growth, which might require rethinking some of the things that may have worked well in the past, but maybe at this time when architects are are really looking for trust, reliability, and real solutions to project problems. How can you be a trusted advisor to that architect? So the first part was just really asking architects through the survey very bluntly, how much of the specifications are you repeating from previous projects? So as you can see over here, about 3/4 of our respondents over here, they said upwards of 60% of products. Now, again, we just asked this very broadly, everything including architecture, interiors, and so on. Architecture firms said they're repeating on an average project. And some of the reasons for repeating the specifications, time saving, to do new research from scratch, every single product for hundreds of products that go into a building can be incredibly resource intensive and time consuming. Sometimes the people that may have been the subject matter experts, the spec writers, the specifiers, may be retiring from these firms, and the firms might be downsizing. So the lack of knowledge about alternatives can be hard to find. The convenience and just knowing how to draw, detailed, render a product you've used in the past, understanding the technical specs, is a big factor. Lack of expertise in evaluating alternatives. It's not a zero-sum game, but there's so many variables involved in the decision making, and being able to evaluate all of them requires a great deal of expertise. If there's a client, the owner's rep, or the contractor, if they have a very firm preference, that can certainly play into that too. And then finally, some of the lower reasons here were the confidence in knowing exactly how something they used in the past had worked out for them. We also asked the architects about, at this time, what are some of the big challenges that they feel in the specification progress. So this is, we were hoping to learn for everything from initial research to working with manufacturers all the way to documentation. What are the challenges architects are feeling? Scattered information, having to maintain multiple sources of record. That's a big one. Architects still have a firm library, although no architect as the firm gets paid to maintain that library. All of the information gets spread across local servers and folders, and it can be very hard to keep track of when you're specifying. That's one of the big reasons why I think that recycling of specs happens all the time. Too many tools required for the process. Right now, there's a lot of piecemeal solutions for every piece of the puzzle. So code, sustainability, specs, initial research, having to go to hundreds of manufacturers' websites and so on. Lack of product knowledge. It can be incredibly hard for architects to learn only exclusively through lunch and lunch. A lot of the times when those presentations are happening at the firm, they're incredibly valuable and incredibly educational, but it may not be happening at the time of immediate need for that specific architecture firm. And it can often get lost from, I think somebody said on the panel, you just remember the most recent thing. Difficulty in being able to compare products across various manufacturers. A lot of manufacturers are updating the product offerings all of the time as well. For architects, it can often be challenging to keep a good record of that. Then I think lack of on-demand education, again, like related to lunch and learns and product knowledge, is also a substantial one. Inadequate manufacturer support, having really good reps that you've trusted for a while, or true subject matter experts in a product area, was another reason that ranked fairly high. The value of education, you cannot underscore that enough for architects. In this case, over some really good news, I think, for manufacturers on the panel, who talked a lot about being trusted advisors, offering that education, that knowledge to architects. But over almost 80% architects said, we do tend to specify products from folks that have educational material for us. Which in this case might mean a webinar, it could mean CUs, it could mean lunch and learns, product literature, and so on. The ability or a preference from architects to collaborate with manufacturers was another thing we were hoping to learn from this. So really good news there. A lot of preference from architects to collaborate, but I think maybe one of the one of the nuances of this might be being able to collaborate on demand, or when the architect needs a manufacturer the most for the project or for the sake of the firm library. And then finally, another insight we discovered here was at which stage in the process in a design project are you most receptive to new information? So generally pre-design schematics all the way through DD, which is usually when the architects have a little bit more bandwidth. As soon as you flow into CDs, deadlines, you have your back against the wall, changing your mind would lead to a lot of rework. And as you go later in the project, I think there may be a few folks on the call who might know the McClamey curve. As you go later in the project, it's more expensive and it's a lot harder to administer new changes, be it a product, be it an assembly, so on. So piecemeal solutions remains a very big problem in the industry right now. I think it's also due to the fact that while there's a lot of pieces to the puzzle, again, code, cost, specs, design options, a few of these options are changing all the time as well. So a lot of information for architects to keep track of, and to find an answer immediately may not always be feasible. So we see, an interest from architects here on integration, increasing reliance on digital tools. Almost, let's see here, over 85 or so % of respondents underscored more reliance on tools for different stages in the specification process. And then value of sustainability, and then also the certifications related to sustainability, ever increasing. Now we're hearing about new programs which have maybe been mandated by the government, may be very important for larger projects, which make it really important for architects also to care about the stipulations. We're calling this the architect preferences hexagon. And so just like a snapshot of all of these graphs and charts we just looked at, a lot of very good insights here, but for manufacturers, these 6 things underscore the biggest strengths to pay attention to from an architect and specification standpoint. Key areas we've heard from architects both through the survey and then also just in ongoing conversations. Big focus on integration, making sure data and insights are flowing across tools seamlessly, and not having to keep a record of revisions, iterations across a lot of different silos of data. Automation, so being able to get education, answers, documentation on demand, as opposed to having to waste a lot of high-value design time on these administrative tasks, like manually finding information, having to stitch together information from 4 or 5 different sources. And then centralization, being able to do initial research, being able to speak with reps and find all the documentation from the same place. I think this means both technology tools, but I think this can also mean manufacturers who can offer that integration in-house instead of having different departments of team that the architects have to cycle through. I think one of the recent events we did, somebody underscored the value of one neck to choke. And so for architects, having less vendors who can offer more at the same time and can really be very reliable and trustworthy goes a long way. Yeah, so I'm sure for like a lot of manufacturers and reps attending this event, the product library remains a central source of knowledge for architecture firms, but maintaining that is incredibly difficult at a time when layoffs are happening. Summer interns might not be joining next year, and it can be super difficult to make sure that all of your information from a project after it's already been done is standardized, it's centralized, you're updating the library with new additions to the firm library standards and so on. So how do we avoid this lack of knowledge, awareness, resources, and time for the architect? This was the genesis of Acelab. Again, we're a team of architects. We felt like there was a big need in the industry for architects to gain the control over decision-making for materials and have a good single source of truth for all the product decisions they make on a project. And then on the other side now, we also work with a big network of manufacturers. Our focus is really being a matchmaker, so helping an architect all the way from initial research and firm library to centralize their knowledge, to making a decision and being able to optimize a product choice based on the cost, availability, aesthetics, performance, sustainability, and then finally automating the documentation for the decision in specs, schedules, and so on. This is really like the brain of the platform. I think for manufacturers, looking at the jigsaw at the center of the screen, this is all of the criteria an architect is balancing both on the scale of a product decision, but then also the project. And I think like this is where that lack of knowledge can really be very tricky for the architect, in that it can sometimes feel like it's a zero-sum game, but it almost never is a zero-sum game. There's always trade-offs, and being able to understand the trade-offs sometimes requires expert recommendations or expert opinions, which maybe is not something the architect can think about themselves. That was another great point, I think, from the panel. So for us, that's the same focus as well. We think of this as the brain of the platform. There's a big schema of the product data, what's the implementation on cost, who are the local reps to go for those specific products or manufacturers, what are the implications on building code based on jurisdictions that need to be satisfied, what are the carbon implications, and then now something really cool we're starting to work on are the assemblies. Okay, you use or you as an architect look at the big ticket item. It could be the cladding, it could be the glazing, but what are the other pieces that you need to think about in that assembly? So we've been leveraging AI, and we're seeing a big interest from architects to use AI as a way to capture institutional knowledge. So the way we're doing this is every single architecture firm we're working with, we're asking them for their specs, schedules, drawing sets for the last 5 years. And we go through this using our AI. We parse through this information to see what has been used in the past. What were the decisions made in the past? Now, architects are very happy to do that, because on the other side, we stand up a firm library for them. So this is one central record of every decision that they've made in the past. And then if we have a manufacturer on the platform who's got their local reps, then those automatically load in to their firm library as well. The key focus here being, if an architect has a question, if they've seen like preliminary information, how do we get that architect to an answer? It could be for price quotes, lead times. I want to discuss a project. Here's my firm standard I've used in the past 5 years, but I would be willing to flip that spec if it helped me optimize on the cost, aesthetics, any other criteria, while keeping everything else they liked about their firm standard in the past. And then we've realized, the relationships are really important. So our team actually now has started to play the role of an infinite independent resource by acting as that bridge between architects who don't have a Rolodex of hundreds of experts like, the 3 folks on our panel. And I'm sure like a lot of the folks attending this event. But how can we be the guide? How can we be the conduit from the architect to any manufacturer, any product area they want to learn more about, they want to explore options for? And then now we're sort of extending that using AI. How do we automate this intelligence from the platform so that an architect can receive the answer as opposed to having to scour through a lot of information? Another big thing which I feel like is lacking both for the architect and the manufacturer is being able to track a product across the different stages of the project. And so in this case, with the firm library, every time they're adding a product into their firm library, they're also choosing the status. Is it been approved by the client? Is this a value engineered choice? Has it been approved as an alternate, and so on? Now to shift gears, let me see how, we're 5 minutes over time. I'm going to wrap up very quickly here. For the manufacturers, I'll just underscore the top 3 challenges over here. Identifying architects during the early stages of the process, of the specification process, limited visibility into ongoing projects where you hit the cone of silence, building new relationships with architecture firms that you may not have worked with in the past. These are some of the key areas that we attributed in this report to the quality of a connection that you receive from a platform, from some other tool. I'm gonna save, I won't go too much into detail with this graph, but the idea is how do you balance the quality of a connection versus cost? And so when the green line is up, that's usually a great indicator. And when you start to feel like the cost index is higher than the quality, that's some areas which may be worth to reconsider using into the next year. And then here we've just sort of underscored, obviously, your own site, if you're able to drive the traffic there, that's the most efficient. You have the most amount of the authority or control for those leads. And then some integrated tools like Acelab, which are offering all three stages of the process to architects. Lunch and learns, it could be, really depending on the product, but if you have a high-end product, those can still be a very efficient way and high value way of being able to get architects into the fold. I'm going to skip a few of these things about the Acelab platform, but we found that doing education on demand is often really valuable, both for the architect and the manufacturer. And finally, 5 things to remember for manufacturers to evaluate as some S&M investments into the next year. Ability to get in early in the design process. How does that investment affect your ability to educate the architects as a trusted advisor? Your ability to support the architect on demand. How complete is the solution, or even if you're investing into the development of your own resources or website, and the quality of information that you're able to get on as the bottom line, information about the firm, the project, the product area the architect is interested in, and what is the follow-up required to that inquiry. All right, we still have most of the attendees over here, and we still have the panelists over here. Maybe we'll take 2 minutes if any of the attendees have a question for the panelists, and then we can wrap off.
Yeah, well, I saw actually Alex had asked a question, and thank you, Carolina, for starting to help answer it. And Vardhan, actually, you did too with those last few slides. But what is the best way to get your product known when maybe the architect doesn't know the product category even exists? In this case, it's a retractable pool, spa, and patio enclosure. Carolina, I mean, I certainly feel like rain screen is like a newer product category that people might not even know exists. Like what have you guys done to help raise awareness of that?
Yeah, that's kind of what I typed in on my answer. Once you've identified who your ideal customer is, find companies that are non-competitive with yours that are already selling to those people, and you'll be best friends. Like, reach out to them on LinkedIn, go to networking events, find who those people are who are already serving your customer, and go offer trade shows, little tabletops, and have them kind of pull you in. You could even create some sort of rebate, some sort of think affiliate marketing strategies, because it's kind of a way for them to pull you in.
Yeah, so in this case, probably pool and spa, installation companies, right? Like that whole dealer network that's pretty established would be a great place to
Or even tile, like people that sell glass tiles to pools, and like anybody who's already selling to your customer.
That's a great idea. Kevin and Jeff, do you guys have other ideas?
I would agree with the trade show thing. I think you can definitely get a lot of traction because you can get a lot of people interested in interested in your product in one place. I also find anytime we introduce a new product that somebody doesn't know is there, you've got digital things you can do. There's online marketing you can do, but it's also face-to-face to some extent as well. It takes time for people to remember you're there. You can get it out there, they can see it, and then they leave and they forget, and they got to see it again, and they got to see it again. It's a lot of repetition just to make them remember that you have this product that's available there, unless they're looking for the solution immediately. And then it's a little easier, but otherwise you kind of have to have a multi-pronged approach because they will forget. We all have short memories.
Yeah, you have to be developing your brand over time in order to be able to generate sales overnight, right? You have to invest in the long game to be able to see the short-term results.
Absolutely.
I think that the shotgun approach is also important because whether if you're gonna do regional trade shows, local AIAs, industry, trade shows, you can really slice it up a lot of different ways. And it's not that much of a dollar commitment as much as it's a time commitment, but you have to be willing to put in that time to make that awareness and make those connections. But there's a lot of, and I'm sure every industry has them. I mean, we have them for the facades, facade tectonics, facade plus, this facade, that facade, 6 different, shows or expos, in New York City spread out over a year, plus the local AIAs, plus a CSI, all those types of things are great ways to see a whole bunch of people at one time, in the span of a few hours. And it doesn't require, now if you want to do that in 6 or 7 or 8 cities, then spend a lot of money, but you target 1 or 2 cities first, try to get a job. And you might want to also make an investment in a particular project. If you have a friendly architect or design team, someone you've worked with, you may say, listen, we've got this great product and we're willing to discount it 50% to get it into the first 1 or 2 jobs, and give them a reason to let you, showcase your product there.
Yeah. Yeah. We work a lot with clients, Jeff, to help them develop a blueprint for how they open up new markets, right? Like go in and try a few markets and some of these grassroots tactics and figure out what's working best for you. And then use that as a model that you can start to say, okay, here's how we're going to do this at scale, before you go in and try and do it, nationwide. Because like I said, earlier, marketing is the act of ruthless exclusion, or the focus is so important. Like geography can be a way that you create focus, right? And so start a place where you feel like you have an opportunity to win, and then grow from there, versus feeling like the whole United States or wherever is your market, right?
Right.
All right, guys. I think that was pretty fabulous. Yeah, on all fronts. That's great research, Fardon. Thank you.
Well, we really appreciate all the attendees who joined us for this event. We're going to do more conversations like this. Maybe we'll bring in more architects, other stakeholders from the project teams into those as well. So again, thank you so much for joining us this Friday afternoon. Hope everybody has a great weekend, and we're going to share the recording right after.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everybody.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.
Thanks.